Hello and welcome to the Last Edit podcast. I am Citizen Sleeve and this is my amazing friend.
Silver Hawkins.
And if you don't know already, if you haven't watched us before, this is a weekly film podcast where we alternate between our choice of film and then we discuss it in depth. This week is quite a special one for me. Prior, we talked about Silver's favourite film, which is, of course, Miller's Crossing. And this week we're going to discuss the magnificent cyberpunk opus that is Ridley Scott's 1982 classic Blade Runner. It came out on the same day as John Carpenter's The Thing, for those of you who are interested. Great weekend. I wish I'd been older than three. It would have been an amazing film weekend.
And only a year after
So,
Alien.
yeah. Alien was 79. So, yeah,
Or no,
it's
yeah, so 3 years. Yeah, no,
3 years. Yeah.
I thought Alien was 81 for some reason. Yeah, but no, it's 79. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so the only reason I it's cemented in my, well, I no film dates, but it's my year of birth, so it's like Alien. I was born in the year of
Yeah.
Alien. Hell yeah. So Blade Runner. It's it, I've got a lot to talk about. I'll let you speak quickly in a minute, and we'll just do a little quick kind of overview. So Blade Runner is based on Philip K. Dick's short novel,
Do androids
short
dream of
story, I should
electric
say.
sheep?
Yeah, exactly.
It,
And
it,
he was
it,
a,
it, it is a novel. It's not really a short story. It's a novel.
yeah, it's a bit yeah. And Philip K. Dick, for those who don't know, is a purveyor of futurism, a purveyor of often things to do with consciousness and machines and all these. Minority Report, for instance, a lot of films are based on his work.
A Total
But
Recall.
Todd Recall, absolutely. And Blade Runner is a very odd one because when it came out, it was a very different cut from what we're going to discuss. The original cut had narration. The original cut had scenes that were later removed because they altered the tone of the film. Even Harrison Ford, when he was recording the narration, hated doing it. So he made it as monosyllabic and monotone as he could, so they didn't use it, which they did in the original cut. But it cost 35 million to make. It made 28 million. I don't think at the time audiences really knew what to make of Blade Runner because it was so very different from anything else that had really come before it. It's one of the first of its ilk. The first, Technomancer, the novel alongside Neuromancer and things like that at the time. But Blade Runner was the most visual interpretation of the cyberpunk movement that we'd ever seen before. But it's a very slow film.
I
It's a
think
very
I think probably the closest comparison in terms of tone that you're gonna get in sci-fi is Space Odyssey 2001 in
yeah,
a lot of ways.
absolutely. Yeah, that seriousness and
Yeah.
that high level of thematics and thinking about what is consciousness, how does it work, we'll come to that anyway. So it was a film that really didn't. It wasn't even critically successful when it first came out. It just didn't really do that well. People didn't know what to make of it, and a lot of audiences struggled with it, with its ponderous, and especially for the first hour or so. It's a very ponderous, mysterious detective film noir that has this retrofitted futurism, and yeah, it was incredibly distinct. But it wasn't really until the director's cut and then subsequent cuts and you know the real birth of that kind of a movement in things like video games, D&D, then suddenly this film became more and more of a cult film and just developed into one of the most influential films there's ever been put to celluloid.
I mean, I don't know. I think it was even at the time, even before. I mean, the director's cut came out in '91, so
Yeah.
like a decade after. I mean, throughout the '80s, like just Blade Runner's visual influence is distinctly noticeable.
Oh, everywhere. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it was a cult film even before the director's cut. I mean, the director's cut certainly, I think, expanded on it. But I think there's no doubt that it was a cult film even like in the years immediately
it was
after
set.
its release.
I think it began as a cult film, really, because the people
Yeah,
who very really liked it, vehemently liked it. The aesthetic, the tone, the themes, the characters. But more than that, I think in between that period, the release and that 91 director's cut, there was several different cinema cuts, several different versions of the film that was slowly kind of
yeah,
becoming what the director's cut would become. And I think that also helped because back then, you and I know, we were talking about VHSs and DVDs. The proliferation of media hadn't really happened in a digital sense. So it was this mysterious thing, these different versions of the film, and what was missing and what had been added to it. The unicorn, a dream sequence, is a very famous addition in the director's cut and the prior cinema cut.
yeah.
But but the removal of not just the narration but the happy ending, which we'll probably come to in a little bit. Just those little differences, and then a lot of overhauling in some aspects of the structure. But really, at its core, it's that same film. The director's cut just does a much better job. Now we'll be talking specifically about the final cut, which is what is considered to be the final version of that film. But we both know a bit about Blade Runner, so we'll be referring back to all the different cuts and things that we think maybe should be in it, shouldn't be in it. So I'm going to stop talking now because I could just do this forever. So
have you read the book?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, a long time ago.
We can touch on that as well. Because
absolutely.
That as well. But yeah, no. Yeah, I mean it's one of my favorites as well. Like it hits all the right notes for me. It's funny though, like when I rewatched it again for this podcast, I noticed one thing or a couple of things that I haven't really noticed before, where there are a couple of kind of jarring cuts in early on. Like one is the way the initial interview between I forget Holden and Leon.
No, I know who you mean. Yes, sorry, Holden and Leon. Yeah.
When Holden is giving him the void kampf in order to determine whether he's a replicant or not. We should probably start off with the fact that the film basically takes place in the future, or what was the future at the time, 2019.
Which is now, here we are.
Yeah. No flying cars, though.
No flying cars, no.
But yeah, and it's a time where humanity has been able to develop human-like androids that are so human-like that they can basically pass for humans. And they've mainly been used for slave labor on off-world colonies and such.
More human than human. That's our motto.
Work in hazardous environments. And they've basically, some of them rebelled, and that's led to a ban on all androids on Earth. And there are like special police units called Blade Runner units that then hunt down these androids that are loose on Earth. And the movie's main character, Rick Deckard, played by Harrison Ford, is one of these Blade Runners. And he is then tasked with hunting down a squad of 6 replicants that land on Earth. Although 2 of them die off camera. And only like 4 are really in the film. But yeah, the film starts out with an interview between Holden, who is also a Blade Runner, interviewing Leon, who is trying to infiltrate the Tyrell Corporation as a new employee. And he's giving him like the void kampf test, which is a test it's a series of questions and a machine that then measures like pupil dilation and such as the person being tested answers these questions, and it's designed to measure the emotional responses and such. And the test culminates when Leon shoots Holden. And the scene where he shoots Holden is edited really weirdly. I noticed it's not really very convincing in the way it's edited. It just kind of stands out from the rest of the movie. And
there's the exact same problem with Emmett Walsh plays Bryant, and Bryant calls in Deckard. We'll get to that. But there's the part where he's introducing Deckard to the replicants, and for some reason, there's a bit where he speaks and the end of a sentence hasn't finished, and a cut happens and cuts to a reaction, and it doesn't quite work. It's a bit similar to that. I don't quite know structurally why they did it.
There's another moment with Bryant too, which is the very first moment we even see him, which is when Deckard is taken to the police station by Gaff. And we get the really beautiful shot of the police station, and it pans down into Bryant's office.
Yeah.
But then there's a cut right before Deckard actually opens the door and steps into the office.
Yeah.
Like for a split second, which is really weird, because normally you would just see that whole scene being done in one take. But here there's just like this one cut, and it really sort of takes you out of the moment.
Well, it's set up to do it in one take. That's why there's a bloody hole in the ceiling. I mean, that's the point, to be able to, cascade down into the... But yeah, there are... I mean, I have very few criticisms of this film.
Me too.
But I have the perspective of other people, so we'll certainly talk about things they might not. And I think one of them is that there is only early on, really. Just those few moments where structurally the editing isn't quite right. It's not bad or anything. It's just a bit not
It's a little
disjointed.
jarring, yeah.
Yeah, there's jarring is the right word. Yeah.
Especially from like the standard that I don't know, we've sort of established in the past, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years, like of how these things are generally done. Like it's, but I mean some of the stuff that's on display here in Blade Runner was really innovative for the time.
Oh, massive. I mean, let's talk about the world and its influence. I mean, straight away we can talk about things have changed now. I mean, I watched a little documentary about Mr. Robot, the Amazon series, and how that is kind of the new cyberpunk. Because, in a contemporary sense, because cyberpunk now, the notion of it is very different to the way it originated. The origination was advertising billboards everywhere, saturating the landscape. The class system broken down, so the high rises at the very top of the rich and powerful, at the bottom in the slums of the poorest. And the world's kind of moved on from that notion because advertising is now in the palm of our hand permanently. So that's slightly changed. But in terms of technology and aesthetics, wow, this film. The Esper machine is essentially Photoshop before Photoshop. This giant mechanical machine that you can zoom into photos and identify bits and
Yeah.
pieces. It's almost like the physical, technical version of what Photoshop way beyond that, obviously, but what the origins could have been. The Voight-Kampff machine, this way of identifying human to replicant, and you said the visual tells, the emotional responses, and how you do that. But then flying cars, the dystopian cities where the poverty does exist in this way, and things like favelas across the world. There's so much of it, not just even aesthetically, but also in sound. Vangelis' soundtrack for this is my favorite soundtrack to anything that exists in the world.
Yeah,
It's
I
it's
mean,
just
it's the only I think that we've talked about that, but to me, it's the only like 80s synthesizer score that still holds up.
yeah,
Vangelis' score for Blade Runner.
yeah. Just that opening. I mean, I remember when I first saw it. I think I was about 11 or 12, and when I saw that opening, the flames blow out of the industrial areas.
Yeah,
The spinners flying past, spinners the flying cars, for those who don't know, flying past, and the sound they make, and then it's like illuminate, and then that really the tone shifts, and then we get that cut into the eye, the close up,
yeah.
and then the Tyrell Corporation. I'd never seen anything like it, and quite honestly, it's not been surpassed.
I mean, in terms of like the opening shot, it's up there with the opening shot of Star Wars: A New Hope, where you have the Star Destroyer coming in.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I remember,
truly iconic.
like I finally got the chance to see A New Hope in the cinema back when they launched the special editions.
Special editions.
In what was it, 97, 98? Like
Yeah,
right around
97.
there. Yeah. And I finally got the chance to see it in the movie theater, and I saw it in like the biggest theater here, which is also where I got the chance to see Blade Runner's final cut eventually. But yeah, like seeing that Star Destroyer come in, like the vibrations and the vroom, just blew me away. And Blade Runner's like opening shot just does the same thing. They're up there with the biggest and greatest in movie history for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And to get the cohesion right, I mean, straight up, we have to talk about the fact that this is a film that there was no CGI. There was no CGI. Everything is physically produced. The models are so intricate and so well developed and so well lit. That in itself, I mean, it's beautiful. It's just beautiful to look at. That even the blimp, the blimp that says "Come to an off-world colony for a chance to begin again," moving across the skyline. And then coming back down to Deckard outside, ordering noodles. Two,
Yeah.
4, 2. No, fine.
I should point out though that the visual design of like the city and like the cyberpunk aesthetic was not really original to Blade Runner. Like the Blade Runner took
Metropolis.
not even Metropolis. Like Blade Runner specifically, much like Star Wars did to a large extent, took. I don't know, like 70 or 80% of the visual design from a French comic book or a Belgian comic book artist
Yeah.
named Mobius, or Mobius, who was really actually named Jean, but who became really really famous in the 70s. Like he founded like the heavy metal comic book. One of the founders of that, and he just became his work just became immensely prevalent to where it really sort of infused nearly all science fiction, like the visual concept artists of science fiction at the time.
Well, Sid Mead, who was the
Yeah,
production designer on Blade Runner,
and Ralph
heavily influenced.
and Ralph McQuarrie,
Yeah,
concept artist on Star Wars, at the time, were both really heavily influenced by Moebius, like to the point where they even like specific storyboard panels are like just one-to-one nearly copies
literal
of
recreations,
comic
yeah.
book panels from Moebius comics. So yeah, there are a lot of like influences, but Blade Runner just sort of manages to pull them all into this beautiful confluence of influences and stuff that just really works.
Yeah. I think one of the beauties of this film, which is why it's remained my favourite film since I saw it, is its depth. You scratch the surface in this film, and there is so much depth to almost everything you see, even inconsequential characters. Every character has a level of depth that you don't often see. Every theme has a level of like this is essential. If you're going to boil it right down, this is a film noir detective story. But it's so much more than that because it moves past that because it starts talking about machines and consciousness and existence and the existential sense of who you are and what you are and what are replicants? Can they be human? All these questions that go far beyond what a traditional detective film noir would, but it still maintains that aesthetic, maintains that style and that mood. There was some like when okay, we should do a little bit more of a narrative, I guess, character-wise. So Deckard obviously is the Blade Runner. His captain is Bryant, who basically calls him in. He's retired because Holden's been taken down.
Deckard is retired.
Yeah, so he's called in by Bryant, who, as the police chief, basically clicks his fingers and gets Gaff to go and grab him, bring him in a lovely scene in the spinner again, and heading towards the Tyrell, heading towards the police station, and the roof. I love that because it's the cover of the poster. It's
Yeah.
And basically he's put to task to capture or eliminate these four.
Well, eliminate. Not really.
Eliminate.
Capture isn't really an option, I don't think.
So Pris is this pleasure model.
Again, sorry to interrupt, but again, in like science fiction sort of convention is established sort of by 1984, and like dystopian futures, we have newspeak because you don't kill the replicants, you retire them.
You retire them, yeah, exactly. I love that. Now you said city speak as well, just that hodgepodge language they use in the slums around Los Angeles.
Yeah, that was something that James almost basically just developed.
He invented himself, yeah. Which is amazing. The cast for this, wow. So the four replicants are Pris. She's what's described by Emma Waltz as Bryant as a basic pleasure model, and it kind of just in that little scene it displays their intelligence and their strength and stuff. Zora is a combat specialist, and then you've got Leon, who is just played brilliantly by Brian James. He's just a straight up. He's not dumb, but he's I don't know the thug of the group, but he's also thoughtful at times. Some of the things he says. But Roy Batty.
He's basically the hard labor one, the loader unit who gets tasked with carrying all the heavy stuff on the off-world mining colonies.
Yeah, dependably strong. And then finally we have the leader of the four, who is played sensationally by Rutger Hauer, and that's Roy Batty, who is Tyrell. Elden Tyrell is the head of the Tyrell Corporation, who essentially created replicants.
Yeah, he is the newest model, the Nexus 6.
Yeah, the prodigal son, as Tyrell calls him. Oh man, I don't think there's a weak performance in this film. I think every single central character, every single ancillary character, it's just beautifully performed. Chew. So the replicants are trying. Okay, I'll do the little setup first. So the replicants are basically the whole point of what they've come to Earth for, back to Earth, is to try and find a cure for the incept dates. The fact that they don't have longevity built into them is a 4-year lifespan, and when that 4-year lifespan ends, they automatically die. They shut down. They want to get past that. They want to live. They're starting to develop identities and memories and lives, and they want that to carry on. They want to live as humans do, but they can't find a way to do it. So they try and work their way through people within Tyrell to get to Elden Tyrell to find out if there's a way they can live longer. And one of the first people they go and find is Chew, who is the eye creator. And just again, I mean, not only is the scene he and Leon walk past this weirdly lit street with neon and there's bikers going past and go into this room which is very low temperature, obviously because he's working with the eyes and has to make sure that they are protected from disease, bacteria, and all that stuff. But just the way that Batty and Leon, like Leon wanders the room, picks out the eye from what liquid is it? Liquid nitrogen or something.
Yeah.
Very cold. Will freeze your hand and break most people. And kind of that, just a little nod to him being a replicant. So Chew then knows. And
But I mean, even then, Chew basically knows even before he does that because
yeah,
they go and confront him, and he says, "You're not supposed to be here. It's illegal for you to be here, like on Earth." Presumably, at least that was my understanding. That he knows in that moment that they're replicants and that replicants shouldn't be on Earth, which is where that line comes from.
yeah, you can't be here. You know, be here. And his performance as well, just in that little role, is again. I can't applaud the performances.
Yeah, I forget his name, but
Intricacy.
he's one of the most like pervasively used Chinese American actors. Like
He's in a lot of he's in a few John Carpenter films.
Usually,
as well.
always gets these like smaller side character Chinese roles.
Yeah, but he I think is brilliant, and the way the scene plays out with him, Leon behind him ripping off the suit that keeps him warm, and he starts shivering. Just the intricacy of that performance, and then he obviously suggests that. Well, we want to see Tyrell. Tyrell's a difficult man to see, Roy Batty says, and he says you'll need to go and.
Yeah, they
find
tried to see
Sebastian.
Tyrell, and two of them died trying
Yeah,
to break into the Tyrell Corporation, which is
Yeah,
why
exactly.
Leon then tried to infiltrate it and got caught by Holden and had to shoot Holden.
yeah, and then JF Sebastian they have to find, and the whole build up to that is I also think is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah,
I could
with Pris.
just gush with Pris, yeah.
Yeah.
So we haven't seen Pris up until this point. Pris is hanging around. Well, in the rain, it's hammering down with rain. She's got some kind of rubbish and paper bags covering her, and she's sleeping on the floor. It's clearly a ploy set up by Roy to try and ingratiate herself into the life of J.S. Sebastian, who is this weird genetic inventor, genetic designer who creates his own little buddies.
I don't know that it's set up by Roy specifically, though. I think Pris knows enough to set that up on her own.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, like he's obviously told her this is the person that we need
Yeah,
to
yeah,
see.
and then
I think
she goes on her own initiative.
I think
yeah.
you might have the best, way to get to him. Whereas if we just turn up, we might not, try different tactics at least. And so he comes home. She wakes up. She smashes his car window. She tells him she's cold and hungry, and he invites her into just this.
And played by Daryl Hannah, by the way.
And she's amazing as Pris as well. I don't think she's been in a better performance. A better role. I think this is her best role. I've seen her in a lot of very good stuff.
I think the only one that comes across as
Kill Bill.
Yeah, Kill Bill, and I mean, really, the only one part I remember her from is what's the one where she's the mermaid? With
with Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks.
Wet.
Yeah.
No, Splash.
No, not Wet. Splash. Yeah.
There we go. All the water adjectives before we finally found one that really works. But yeah, Splash. I think she's amazing. She's this kind of. She's a femme fatale. She's unhinged, but also very playful. And when later on in the film, when she puts on the makeup and she gets properly involved in fights and stuff, whoa, she's crazy. She's very crazy. But she invited him by J. Sebastian, and he's got this rare condition, which means he looks far older than he is. He ages more quickly. And he's created these two mini replicants, I guess. But they're more like low-level AIs that wander around his house and bump into things and make cute noises.
Yeah, in the
I think
form
what,
of like teddy bears and dolls. Yeah,
yeah, and there's that little
like
soldier with the
basically
long
just
nose.
animatronics.
Yeah, yeah, like a kid would have dolls or toys, but yeah, far beyond that. And they're brilliant. They wander around that
Yeah,
like when she first enters, they go, oh, "Good evening, JF." Clickety click, and then
yeah.
off they go, bump into a door and turn left or something.
And
But
JF is of course is played by William Sanderson, who's
oh, and yeah,
really good in this film. Like also really good in like the only part I he's played like minor roles as well
yeah,
as a minor character actor, but he's really good in HBO's Deadwood as E.B. Farnham, one of my favorite characters in television history.
something I still need to watch. It's another thing on the list. Um, yeah, I mean, and the room, Jeff Sebastian's um floor, I guess. But so basically, this film is what we call retrofitted for those who are watching us who don't know what we're talking about. Retrofitting was a term that was almost created by Blade Runner, and it's taking an environment and retrofitting it with things that make it look like it's already been lived in. It's a very simple concept, but they use the Bradbury Building, which is a very famous film building that's used in lots of different films, and they retrofitted it and created this environment for J. Sebastian to live in. And wow, the lighting,
Yeah, when
the
the advertising blimp flies overhead. Yeah,
the curiosities in his room as well. Wow.
yeah, it's really cluttered. Feels really lived in.
Yeah, and there's like life-size dolls, things that are moving, little whirring noises, almost like a an obscure curiosity shop, you used to get back in the day. They don't really exist anymore. But you'd go in and see all these crazy, otherworldly things that you'd never see anywhere else. I think that's just sets him apart as this weird, odd, separate character who's very isolated and invents all these crazy things. So they kind of hit it off. And from there, it all starts picking up pace a little bit. Um, I guess we should move on to Sean Young. Um, that whole scene where she's called Rachel, who's this another Nexus 6, and Deckard is sent to Tyrell to see if he can put the machine on it to prove she's a replicant, to see how well the replicant knows what it is or doesn't know what it is. And that for me is also one of the best
Well,
lit
really, he's
scenes.
sent there to see whether the Void Kampf will catch a Nexus 6, because that's what they don't know. Is the Nexus 6 line now so good that it can actually fool or trick the Void Kampf, which is why
Exactly, yeah.
record goes to Tyrell.
And that scene where they enter Tyrell's office, the sun is kind of beaming through, is one of the
Yeah,
most
the owl.
beautifully. It's so well lit. It's such a wonderful atmosphere that's established just through that lighting, and then Tyrell presses the button and the I don't know the opaque semi digi blinds come down. It's like oh, the music as well is awesome, and they have that little exchange. Do you like our owl? Is it real? No. Was it expensive? Very. And they sit down. He sets up the machine. I love Elden Tyrell in this. I just he's supposed to be God. That's the point. He's supposed to be, the replicant's idea of God, and the way he speaks about more what is it? More human than human is our mission here.
Our motto, yeah.
Our motto, yeah. Just the way he looks, the giant glasses that he's got this. It's almost like a
Yeah,
quiet,
because
intelligent authority.
I mean, Deckard puts Rachel under the test because Tyrell says he wants Deckard to give him a false positive before he provides him with
Yeah,
a real positive. Before he actually provides him with a Nexus 6, he wants him to try it on a human in order to ostensibly give him a false positive. And then Deckard puts Rachel under the Void Kampf test, and lo and behold, it turns out she's actually a replicant.
Mm.
Only it takes him. Normally, it takes like 20 to 30 questions to catch a replicant, but with a Nexus 6 like Rachel, she's possibly even a generation beyond Nexus 6, which is something that is sort of mentioned in 2049,
Internet, yeah.
the
Yeah.
sequel. but he puts her on the test, and it where it normally takes 20, 30 questions, with Rachel it takes 100 in order to figure out that she's actually a replicant. And then Tyrell reveals to Deckard that he started implanting the replicants, that Rachel is an experimental model where they've started to implant memories in order to give her, because they found that because of the 4-year lifespan, like their lack of identity from like a base of memories really sort of engendered a lot of conflict, and
they're emotionally stunted, aren't they?
And trying to provide them with like they're trying to like provide them with a foundational buffer in terms of like a memory and a past life.
To give them some kind of base to work from rather than essentially a blank slate.
Yeah, and that's something that really, really shakes Deckard.
Yeah. I like a few of the lines. There's that one where Rachel says, "Are you testing whether I'm a lesbian or a replicant, Mr. Deckard?"
Yeah.
and the bit at the end with the butterfly in the killing jar, and just the way it plays out is really cool. And Joe Turkel as Elden Tyrell, he gives this highly intelligent ease of flow of language and this amazing intellectual authority. Yeah. Any scene he's in, and I think again he just plays that character so wonderfully well. So then the relationship essentially between Deckard and Rachel kind of begins.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's if we're talking about just like plot points and not the technical aspects, like the relationship between Deckard and Rachel is really, I think, like the biggest weakness in the movie. There isn't really a whole lot of chemistry between Harrison and Sean Young.
No, there isn't.
And a lot of that is down to things that actually happened on set, which comes through on the camera. And yeah, it's kind of weird, like throughout. But I mean, that being said, to me, like one of the best scenes, if not the best, my favorite scene in the movie, is after they've met at Tyrell, and after he's learned that she's a replicant, and so he goes back to his apartment. And Rachel comes to see him there, because Tyrell will no longer talk to her. And she doesn't know what's happening. Like, she can't possibly be a replicant. She has a memory of a full life that she's lived since she was born. And then Deckard starts listing all these memories from her childhood, like relating them to her that she hasn't shared with anyone. Like her most intimate memories, and tells her that they were basically the memories of, I think, Tyrell's niece.
Niece. Yeah.
And yeah, and then it basically breaks her, because she learns everything she knows. The reality that she thought she knew is fake. It's made up. And you see that also makes a deep-seated impression on Deckard, who then tries to tell it, no, it was a joke. No, I'll make you a drink. And then he goes to the kitchen, tries to fix her a drink, and she takes off. And then he sits down in what to me is the most compelling scene in the film, and he just surrounds himself with all his own family photos, like his own past, his own memories. And the film never says it, but pretty obviously questions himself. And the nature of his own identity. And this is where Scott, with the director's cut and the final cut, to me, essentially ruins the film. To the point where I have to completely ignore the scene to even enjoy it, where he puts in the unicorn.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, the unicorn dream, and in doing so, he completely removes the ambivalence as to whether or not Deckard is a replicant. And to me, the movie does not work if Deckard is a replicant. Because the entire thesis of the movie is the motto of, to me, is the motto of Tyrell, like more human than human. That the replicants that Deckard is hunting are basically more human than Deckard, who's the human hunting them. Because he's just doing this hunting them in this really sort of mechanical way. Even though he's like empathetic towards them, he's still hunting them down. And basically kind of robotic in the function of his job. And the replicants really just want to live. and extend their life. And that whole theme gets completely subverted if Deckard is a replicant. It just doesn't really work for me on any level. Also, like, of course, it goes against the book as well, because in the book, Deckard is human. Like, he questions himself in the book and whether he is actually a replicant, but no, he is human in the book. Like, the whole replicant thing is just specifically Scott's interpretation. It's also, of course, a disagreement with Harrison Ford that he's had, because Harrison thinks, no, Deckard is human.
Well, even now in interviews, if you ask the two,
Yeah.
that's what they say, because that's what they believed and that's what they wanted to. I mean, the part of the problem with the unicorn scene is it's not just that it thematically now tries to at least muddy the water, if not essentially make the assertion that he is a replicant.
Well, it does make the assertion, because, I mean, the assertion is brought home by Gaff making the origami figure at
making
the
the
end.
origami. But it's again the jarring nature. It's a bit like the ending for the original cut, which didn't fit in aesthetic terms. It didn't fit in audible. It didn't fit in thematic terms. It just seemed tacked on, and that's what the Unicorn Dream feels to me.
Yeah,
It
it's
doesn't need
basically just Scott going, nah, this is what I think.
Yeah. This is a bit from a film I'll make in 3 years' time called Legend, but I've already started doing the bit of the unicorn, so I'll stick a little bit. Maybe it's product placement, Silver.
Maybe yeah.
We're not thinking as cleverly
True.
as Scott seemed to think he was. But yeah, I totally agree. I want to back up a little bit because I want to just talk about the way that he starts unraveling the case and finding the replicants. So after Leon,
Well, that's not even going back, because that is basically that scene where he like sits at the piano with his memories, is where he notices the photograph and he sort of breaks the case, as it were.
No, it starts earlier. If you remember, he goes to see Leon's flat after it's
I mean,
happened.
true, yeah.
And he finds those. Yeah, but you're right. Yeah, that's really. But yes, so he finds these photos on Leon's flat that seem quite unusual, and that ties into what Silver's just mentioned. So, as he's going through his own memories, and we get that. A lot of this film is about memory and how you create it and what does it mean? Does it mean that you're human? All these things. But then, as he's scrabbling through those photos, he finds these couple of photos, and one of them is of Zora, but it's obscured. She can barely be seen. She's off in the background, and there's a mirror in the way, and it's quite convoluted photo. And he enters that photo into the Esper machine, and manages to find what looks like a scale of some kind. Now, obviously, this is a world in which real animals kind of they exist, but we never see them, or we barely see them.
They don't actually really exist anymore in Blade Runner. Like, they're pretty much. That's one of the things about the setting. Like, animals are pretty much extinct. Pretty much the only animals you can get are replicant animals, basically artificial animals. Because like the nuclear holocaust or disaster or whatever it was, that basically radiated the Earth and gave, like, outside of the movie takes place in Los Angeles, we should say. I think we kind of missed that. But outside of the city it's not really mentioned in the movie, but this is in the book, where outside of LA is basically this irradiated, and it's kind of in 2049 as well.
It is, yeah.
It's basically this irradiated wasteland that they refer to as the kibble.
Yeah, and I guess I should go as well. When Deckard finds the photos, he also there's a bath in the room, and he notices scales on there. So he takes a sample of that scale, and they're the two clues. So he enters it into the Esper machine, and he notices a place, and decides that he'll go to Anodoid Row, and he'll take the scale, and he'll try and find out what this scale belongs to, what animal, where could it come from, and he finds all these different vendors, and then he ends up going to one particular vendor who's a snake specialist. Stop questioning him, and this basically leads him to a bar and to Zora. But there's a bit before we end up meeting Zora, and that whole scene, which is a very violent scene, a very kind of the pace at that point. I think that's the point at which the pace of the film really picks up. It still slows down. It's not like John Wick 3 or something. It's more ponderous than that. But the last half an hour or so in pace terms, the action really kicks up. But there's that little bit beforehand when he goes into the bar. He sees I can't remember the guy now, the bald guy who gives him the drink. He owns the bar. He talks about his license being in order, pal. But then he tries to go and call Rachel, and he just says he wants to see her, and she says he says where he is, and she says that's not my kind of place, and that's it. And then he goes to kind of investigate and try and find Zora. And when he comes across her, he plays this weird, geeky inspector who's looking for peepholes and is concerned with the protection
that scene is immensely creepy.
And the fact that he goes from that voice to his own voice and then back to that voice is a bit weird as well. But that voice is a bit weird. But Zora, she already knows what's going on. She's already clicked that he's something other than he says he is. And, well, yeah, it all kind of kicks off.
Which is really surprising because she was so subtle.
Oh, yeah, really. So she's basically been dancing at the club. She's got a snake around her. She comes off stage. He follows her in, starts talking to her. And then she gets in the shower. Comes out of the shower, puts her top on. He asks him to help, and then smack, down he goes, and off she runs. The following scene, again, I think is absolutely bloody brilliant. It's structured well. It's shot wonderfully. The colour use. So he chases her through the street. He eventually shoots her in the back, and she falls through these series of plate glass windows. And each one shatters in slow-mo, and she falls and slowly drops down. Amazing to see.
Yeah, I think my only real issue with that scene is why doesn't she kill Deckard? Like, it's mentioned in the briefing that she's part of a hit murder squad, Zora. Yeah. And she just basically knocks him down and then runs off like a scared girl or whatever, like a scared person. It's a bit weird that she just doesn't just kill him, but that she just
you'd think that he would would just snap his neck or something. If she, she's that strong and of a murder squad. I mean, my God, like what level is murder squad in the? Oh, you don't want to mess with them. It says murder in the title to start with.
Yeah,
so she goes down quite easily. And then the police surround him. He shows his Blade Runner badge. They turn her over. They rock her body left and right because her eyes don't move like humans do, so that's to tell that she's a replicant. And then off he wanders. And then he comes across Leon in like a little alleyway with some bins. And Leon is none too pleased because Zora was the replicant. They were together. But that's the insinuation with her at the bath and stuff in the beginning. And again, he has some amazing lines. Have you ever had an itch you can't scratch? And then time to die. And just as Leon is about to just squish Deckard's head, Rachel turns up behind him and shoots him in the head.
Yeah. I mean, it also... no, sorry, go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, I should mention that Leon has beaten the living hell out of Deckard up to this point.
Yeah, and that's
slamming him against walls.
That is a running motif in the film because Deckard basically gets beat up by everyone. He gets kind of beat up by Zora, he gets beat up by Leon, and he gets beat up by Pris, and he gets beat up
as well.
By pretty much all of the replicants beat him up. Which also kind of goes a little bit against the whole like Deckard is a replicant thing. I think to an extent.
Well, he's not strong enough.
Clearly, but he could. I mean, he could be designed to be weaker than not because he's designed to be a more human replicant. Maybe would be the argument. But
and this was a question that all of us played with until 2049. I mean, we all knew it really, but it's something that's been there for a lot because that's the main question people came out of this film with. It wasn't what I came out with, but a lot of people have said to me that's what they think the crux of the film is Deckard a replicant? It's not that at all. There's so many more important things going on than whether a character who's got a unicorn dream is.
The question of whether Deckard is a replicant or not is, it is one of the central tenets of the film because it goes to the central tenet of what is life. Because when you can't be sure. When you're at the point where you can't be sure if you are artificial or not, isn't artificial life life?
But that's the problem, as you said. I think because the unicorn dream is inserted,
it's
so heavy-handed.
It removes that uncertainty. Because
then
he's just a replicant, and he's just like the other four.
Yeah, exactly.
And then also the audience has no human gateway or.
Then they're maybe a bit uneasy about who do I... is this the human character to lean on? Is it not? So, Zora's down, Leon is down, and now we start seeing a little bit more of Pris and Roy. Roy turns up at JF Sebastian's house. I think Pris says something. I've got a friend who wants to meet you, and it's weird because he still sees them as machine people, so he asks them to show him something cool, or show him something different, and I think Roy Batty says, "We're not machines, we're physical. I think, therefore, I am," Pris says. And he walks over, I think Pris actually it is, who walks over to a boiling egg in boiling hot water and just lifts the egg out and throws it to JF. And he goes, "Ah!" He's quite a goofy character in some ways because he's such a mad, crazy designer. And in the end, Roy
I mean, he's
convinces...
very childlike.
He is, yeah, absolutely. And Roy comes across a chess game and starts talking to him about it and realizes it's a chess game played between himself and Tyrell, and that he's only
Well,
beaten
between
Tyrell once.
JF and Tyrell.
JF
Yeah.
and Tyrell, yeah. And so Roy Batty sees this as an opportunity, a way in to see Tyrell, and so it's JF kind of, because obviously Roy's really insisting now, and JF calls up Tyrell to tell him a move. They've gone to the corporation. They're in the lift, and he calls him on the intercom and says a specific chess move. And Tyrell goes over to the board very casually and goes, "You better come off, Sebastian." And then we get one of the most iconic scenes in the film.
Yeah, Roy Batty meets his father.
There's a bit when they talk first, obviously. So he knows that Roy Batty has been coming here. He wonders why it's taken him so long. But there's a bit where they start talking about the incept dates and is there any way to change it? And you see Batty's demeanor change, like God has betrayed him, like his creators betrayed him, and betrayed Pris and betrayed his people. And the moment when he takes his father, God, in his hands and kisses him and then squeezes the life out of him, and the way that the lighting is in the room and the intensity of Roy Batty's performance in his eyes, oh man, and then the kind of crunch that you hear and he just lets him drop and the music goes dum dum. It's a film that gives me goosebumps just talking about it, certain parts of it.
Yeah.
That's one of those moments, that the prodigal son, the Jesus figure, the Messiah, kills his father, kills the creator. Very profound moment in the film.
Yeah, absolutely. And then unfortunately, JF, I mean, it's implied that he pays, right?
Yeah.
That they kill him.
Yeah.
Like it's also implied that they kill Chew, even though we never see it.
I absolutely think that happened. Yeah, it's definitely implied. I think maybe they just wanted to save some. Maybe it was budget as well. They didn't want or even the rating. I mean,
it's also not necessary. It's not important.
It's
to the
not.
plot,
It's not
really.
at all. It's not that type of film. It doesn't need it. Yeah, and often violence like that. We've talked about Reservoir Dogs before in the Mr. Blonde ear cutting off sequence that you see nothing of. Often implied violence is far more effective than real violence because you seeing violence often takes
Yeah.
away from what your own imagination can construct in that space. So then the kind of the last portion of the film starts kicking in. Deckard now needs to find Pris and needs to find Roy Batty. He's kind of tracked down JF Sebastian's home, and when he first enters, obviously the two small characters do their little intro first, clickety click, and then walk off again. And he walks into this JF Sebastian's main room, again with the creepy dolls and the weird bits and pieces dotted around that look very otherworldly and different. And Pris is just stood still like a mannequin with a veil across her, painted in white.
And I think that it's interesting, that scene, because it kind of goes to show like the contrast between the first time we arrive at that location, it kind of comes off as kind of a home, and then when Deckard gets there, it kind of comes off as an alien location.
Yeah, then the
more
mood
like
changes.
more like a horror location than.
Absolutely, I think the lighting changes a bit.
Yeah.
All those noises that sounded kind of cool with characters talking around them start becoming quite creepy, and obviously it's not just the fact that Pris is stood still like a mannequin. The whole point, I think, of Ridley Scott's of that scene is to suggest that we often think of AI, like a mannequin, like an unreal thing, that play on that notion. And then, of course, Pris decides, yeah, we're going to kick off. And that fight is crazy. Absolutely.
Yeah.
She's back flipping across the room, screaming, jumping in the air, landing on Deckard's shoulders, kind of throttling the life out of him with her thighs. And he just spends like 5 minutes trying to whack her into any solid surface or wall he can find. Finally, of course, he takes her down and he shoots her a few times, and she very violently thrashes on the floor until she's finally dead. And her tongue sticks out a bit, and that's important in a minute. And then he basically has to wait because Roy Batty is there. He's on his way. So he goes off to another room. He starts searching around, and Roy Batty at this point has found Pris. Is obviously incredibly upset. Kisses her one last time, and obviously at this point, especially after the conversation with Tyrell, the murder of Tyrell, he knows he's going to die soon. They're almost at the end of the 4 years.
Yep.
So they kind of come across each other, and he's in one room and Deckard's in another room, and he's trying to shoot him and he misses, and Roy Batty basically smacks his head through the wall, makes a comment, grabs his arm, pulls the arm through, breaks his fingers, gives him his gun back, and then says, right, it's kind of it's time to go at it. And that scene, I think, again, is Rutger Hauer's just so good in this film.
Yeah.
I love him anyway in a lot of films, but in this film, in this role in particular, he brings a humanity to something, and the intellect he has. His love for Pris, and then the way the film ends. He's sublime. He's absolutely sublime.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's time to talk about the ending, up on the roof where they confront each other. Where Deckard basically tries to chase after Batty, and Batty jumps off a roof onto another roof. Deckard tries the same, but he doesn't succeed, and so Batty grabs him and actually saves his life. And that, I want to tell you, Ridley, I appreciate you as a filmmaker, but that doesn't work if Deckard is a replicant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the whole point of that
little contradiction.
The whole point of that is the replicant decides to save the human. The human wanted to kill the replicant. More human than human.
Yeah.
To me, and that completely that's completely gone if Deckard is a replicant.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean that, and then they just sit together. He pulls Deckard up onto the roof, and they just sit, and he talks about all the things he's seen in the improvised monologue that Rutger Hauer came up with. Like in part, like some of it is that he's incorporated lines and built in that were there in the script. So it's not like it's completely 100% Rutger Hauer, but it's basically that he takes all this stuff and works it together into basically an original monologue that basically relates Batty's experiences off-world, the things he's seen, and how all of this is going to disappear when he dies. It's going to be like he never existed. And
that monologue it's beautiful.
Yes, it is.
Sea beams dancing in Tenhauser Gate, and memories like tears in rain will be lost in time.
Yeah, and
it makes my heart ache listening to
it. Because it's a compelling commentary on humanity's greatest fear, which is our own mortality, and the concept that everything in our lives is actually finite, which is both sort of terrifying and beautiful at the same time.
And of course, he's holding the white dove as well.
Yeah, and that was one of the scenes I was the most grateful for got changed in the final cut, because in the older cuts, even the director's cut, like the cut when he releases the dove is so jarring, because you have it's at night, rain is pouring, it's really sort of seedy, and then you get the cut to the dove that flies off, and it's like in this industrial location, and it's clear blue sky. that
Yeah,
the dove
yeah,
flies off into. That was the
yeah.
old.
It's like everything is suddenly.
Yeah.
Well, it's exactly the same problem again as the original opening to the original cut. They get in that car and it's like, what's happened? Why is it sunny? Why? It
Yeah.
looks like you're driving to a beach. What the hell has happened to the irradiated wasteland that was supposed to be beyond this
Yeah.
place? But yeah, that those little shifts in tone, I think, were definitely problematic at the time. But yeah, it's a bit less so now. Flying off into the sun.
Yeah.
Well, there's so there's so many wonderful elements about this film. I mean, as we've mentioned, there are a few inconsistencies here and there, and there are a few problems. The main one is the unicorn dream. I just don't think it was necessary. I think if you leave that less tangible, then it becomes even more of an interesting talking point,
Absolutely.
even though it's really counted throughout the film. You know, making it so overt is a mistake. But apart from that, I mean, I don't think there are certainly films that are incredibly influential, and this is up there with and maybe beyond a lot of them. Jaws, exceptionally influential film. Star Wars, exceptionally influential. If you go back to French Nouvelle Vague, Jules Agim in the techniques that use, very. We can go back about both Birth of a Nation,
Citizen Kane.
Citizen Kane. But this film for modern audiences, for what it would inspire in science fiction and more contemporary fiction of films, etc. Wow, did this and Neuromancer, the novel that came out just about the same time, just kick cyberpunk into the mainstream. It took a little while to embed, but the influence it's had on all forms of media, especially games. I mean, Cyberpunk 2077 coming out next year, or end of this year, next year,
Yeah.
is almost insurmountable to think about. I mean, after it came out, advertising boards started becoming more prominent everywhere. Technology caught up to it's almost Star Trek in many ways. You know, you see a lot of things in earlier Star Trek episodes
Yeah.
that then eventually become technology,
And we've
and
also
that
now
certainly happened with
basically
Blade Runner.
polluted our planet to the extent where we're looking to
Yeah,
move off world.
yeah, exactly, exactly. It's ridiculous. And AI, of course, now we're at a point now where we're starting to not just develop AI in the sense of what we consider a replicant to be, the weird, odd-looking double take robots that we see with the rubber skin and stuff, but the actual AI that's out there now, which is far more complex and impressive than I think we ever thought when we watched this film. It's if you ever I don't know if you've read it, but if you guys are really interested in the film's production, how it was made, Sid Mead's, all Hampton Fancher and David Peoples, how they wrote the script, go and read a book by Michael Dealey called Future Noir. It's been out for a very, very long time. I had it at university, but it's a really, really good deep dive into its
There's
creation.
also a tremendous documentary. I think it's called Running Days or something.
Yes,
Um,
I don't think it's called that. It's something similar though, but I do know what you mean. I haven't seen it in a very, very long time.
but
But
yeah,
yeah, there
that's
was
definitely which talks about like the entire production of the film from like
yeah,
pre-production where Fincher basically working on the script with Philip K. Dick and stuff. We should also mention, I think we forgot, that the book is entitled Do I Androids Dream of Electric Sheep,
the Electric Sheep. Yeah,
which is, I think, a much better title than Blade Runner. Much more evocative, especially of the themes that the film sort of addresses.
it's a beautiful title, but you can see why a Hollywood exec would go.
Yeah,
This is your second film, Ridley Scott. You want to dream of electric? No, you're okay. All right, Blade Runner. You can kind of see why they would have gone for that.
yeah.
But yeah, if you've never seen Blade Runner, I mean, look, yes, it's a slow film for those who are not used to films that have a pace which isn't typical Hollywood fare. It's very ponderous. It's very thoughtful. It doesn't it doesn't elongate things on purpose. Everything fits. Everything fits beautifully. But you need to be aware that you need to have some patience. Just as with Midwest Crossing,
It's
just a lot of these great films take time, and you
it,
need to get involved in the film's form.
it's also a movie that needs a canvas. If you watch this on your mobile phone, you're
Oh
not
God,
gonna
no.
probably not gonna enjoy it. You need to watch it on a canvas, like on a big screen television, movie theater, wherever you can, wherever you have the opportunity to see it on a big screen, because you need the visuals to sort of be allowed to assert themselves.
Yeah, the aesthetic needs to breathe because it's so beautiful and it's
Yeah,
so detailed, and you're going to miss all kinds of real intricacies if you watch it on anything other than the biggest scale that you can.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it at the cinema because I was lucky enough to see it at university at the cinema. Obviously, it'd been a long time out then, and there were a few limited places that it was shown when the final cut was released.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you can, just go and see it on the bigger screen, because for all its depth and for all its themes and its really detailed narrative, as a visual spectacle, it's quite beautiful, unlike almost anything else apart from now 2049. Many things are kind of similar. I've tried it. Fifth Element being a very, very obvious one. Flying cars, tall high-rises, and the lower classes at the bottom of these high-rises. But there's nothing quite like it. The way it's shot, the way it feels, the way... And as you said in the cinema, to hear the rumble of the music, to hear the synth that Vangelis used, and the way it plays into those beautiful visuals is... it's something quite sublime to see. It really, really is.
It really uses both visuals, audio, with the music, and to really reinforce its themes and really drive them home.
Yeah,
it's
really
a brilliant film.
Right, I'm going to stop there because we could talk for another hour. There's so many little bits that, I mean, just taking apart scenes, the way the shots are constructed. But if you haven't seen it, please go and see it. And I would suggest following it up with 2049, which is the sequel I never thought I wanted, that I never thought would work, that Villeneuve blew out of the water, in my opinion.
I completely agree. Absolutely a worthy sequel.
I don't think there's a director who was more perfect for that. And Roger Deakins, cinematography.
It's also really funny to see Harrison Ford a year after Raiders, basically kind of playing the anti-Indiana Jones, because there isn't really anything likable about Deckard, other than the fact that he's played by Harrison Ford, who is sort of inherently likable. At least sort of middle-aged Harrison Ford is. Like he was when I grew up. Like Harrison Ford was probably my favorite actor. Just that charisma, sort of. I mean, Indiana Jones.
Solo and Indy, man.
It's really,
by the time he'd done this, he'd been Solo twice.
Once. But I mean, to me, even more than Solo, he was just Indiana Jones. And that's basically it.
The adventurer. I think I was the same growing up. I think Star Wars had many iconic characters, but Indy is just Indy. And no one else I've seen could play him.
My favorite scene in all of Indiana Jones' history is like the scene where right in the start, where he's with Alfred Molina, and Molina says, "Throw me the idol, I throw you the whip," and then he throws him the idol, but Molina just drops the whip and laughs and runs off, and so India tries to jump the gap over the chasm or whatever. And he kind of makes it. He's there, and he grabs onto this I forget the English word for it.
The vine.
The vine. Yeah. And he grabs onto it, and he smiles, and then the vine starts giving over, and he goes, "Oh no! That is quintessential Indiana Jones to me. Like the going from the frying pan into the fire constantly, and Harrison Ford is just so good at that.
Yeah, and Deckard, you're right, is the antithesis of that.
Yeah, pretty much.
He's slightly abusive to Rachel.
Yeah,
he's not a nice person particularly,
and he's like genuinely creepy in the scene with Sora.
Yeah, that weird voice and the way he performs that is.
Yeah,
I think that's also a reason I don't think it did well.
Clients might drill holes into your closet.
Dirty little hole, yeah. But yeah, I think that's also maybe one of the reasons why it initially didn't do that well at the box office or critically, because you'd had this actor who'd been in big, larger-than-life, adventurous, happy, friendly roles that the audience really connected with. Deckard is not that character.
No.
He's not going to win you over in that way. You know, Blade Runner's certainly none of those. We'll have to do an indie trilogy discussion at some point. That'd be really fun. But of course, there are only 3 Indiana films that have ever been made, so we don't need to mention anything else in regard to. Although Young Indiana Jones,
Young Indiana Jones is quite good. Yeah,
but
where Sean,
there were no aliens in Indiana Jones.
I forget his last name. Sean, who played Indiana. Sean Patrick Flannery.
Oh yes, that was the
it's
later
actually
one.
quite good as Young
And
Indiana Jones.
Was it River Phoenix who played him initially?
Yeah, that was in only in Last Crusade.
Oh, of course, the opening. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, that would have been great if he'd done one as well.
Yeah, but
Well,
I
anyway,
mean, unfortunately, fate kind of intervened
yeah,
with that.
intervened. Yeah, I think he would have made a great young. He did well in that opening. Well, anyway, I hope you've really enjoyed our discussion of Blade Runner. As I said, it's my favorite film. It's never not been my favorite film. The moment I saw it, nothing has ever. There are films that come close, but nothing has ever surpassed it in my eyes. And I think at this age now, it's so ingrained. I've seen Blade Runner over 100 times. I might have seen it 150 times. I watch it so many times a year.
I probably haven't seen quite that many. I've seen it like 15 or 16, but I know it by heart by now. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I get mildly obsessed. Like when 29 came out, I basically watched that for 2 weeks solid, at least once a day. It felt like I was a film student again because I don't really do that anymore because I haven't got the time. But when I was a film student and then into my 20s, I became very obsessed by certain films. I had to
Right.
watch them and watch them and watch them and watch them. Blade Runner was the kind of the originator of that, and it's never stopped. So yeah, I watch it a ton, all the bloody time. But if you haven't seen it, I implore you to go and see it. It's one of the best films ever made. It's the best cyberpunk film ever made. It has some of the best performances from these actors that they will ever do in their careers.
Yeah.
The soundtrack is stunning, and it's one of the most gorgeous films ever made to look at. Go and watch
For sure.
it. Now, I have no idea what we're going to watch next week because you haven't. You mentioned a few different things. I think there was
Yeah.
one thing you mentioned, but what have you decided then for next week?
I think I've actually sort of gone with trying something completely different.
Okay.
And actually going for a movie that I haven't actually seen, but
Ooh,
I've
okay.
always wanted to see it. I've wanted to see it for 20 years, which is Mike Leigh's Topsy Turvy. I've just
Wow. Okay.
never had the option or possibility of watching it because I could never find it. I could never track it down anywhere. Yeah, it's basically the story of Gilbert and Sullivan.
Yeah.
British, basically popular opera writers and conductors who were very good at what they did. And like the clips I've seen from the film, the stuff I've read about it, it sounds really, really good. There are some really impressive shots here, really impressive scenes rather that are done in one take with rehearsals and stuff. Really intricate. Yeah, I really want to see it. And I finally found an outlet for it where I can actually see it, and I really wanted to see it and talk about it. So yeah, Mike Leigh's Topsy Turvy will be next, I hope.
That sounds great to me. I have seen it before. Not for a very long time, and I think only once, maybe twice. So I remember bits of it. And you're right, there are some tracking shots that my mind automatically when I first saw it went to Goodfellas.
Right, yeah.
They're not quite the same.
Like when Ray Liotta steps into the club, yeah.
Oh, that's one of the best shots ever in film. Full stop. But yeah, there are some beautiful tracking shots, long takes that really glide through the environment and the set design. You're going to absolutely love. You're going to love.
I mean that's what it won the Academy Award for. I think that year.
Yes,
Was costumes and set design. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely gorgeous. It really is. Well, hey, that was brilliant. I'm looking forward to it. Again, I haven't seen it in a very long time. I studied Mike Leigh for a little bit. Secrets and Lies was always the one that was.
Yeah.
You must see Secrets and Lies. A great film, obviously, as well. Very, very different.
Yeah, I mean he's a great filmmaker.
Yeah. Right. Talk to us in the comments, guys. Talk to us about Blade Runner. I adore it. Silver adores it. We have niggles with it, but for me, it's one of the best films I've made. Same with Silver. Talk to us about Blade Runner. Talk to us about your favourite films. Talk to us about our choice next week. Have you seen Topsy Turvy? Did you like it? Do you have problems with it? Talk to us about film. That's what we're here for.
Absolutely.
Literally. That's what we're here for. Right. Thank you very much for watching. We shall be back very soon. Take it easy.
Take care.